Let me introduce the next session, which is the second half of the George C. Pimentel Award in recognition of Dr. Zafra Lerman. And the title this afternoon is Chemistry for Human Rights, Diversity, and Peace. We heard many stories this morning about the effect Zafra has had on chemical education all over the world. And now we're going to hear the other side of Zafra, because not only is she a passionate person about her chemical education, but she's also passionate about human rights. And I think that that's sort of really how I got involved with Zafra, and I consider her my mentor. As a matter of fact, not only is she my mentor, she's also my sister. And she's sister to many of the women in the Middle East. And so we sort of, when we greet each other, we sort of address her as our sister. So it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to chair this half of the symposium. And I will tell you in advance that one of our speakers, Dr. Mohammed Hugarat, was not able to be with us this afternoon. He wasn't able to get the release from his university to come here. So we will have a little bit of space in the second half of the session for a little bit of time. So but I'm not encouraging people to run overtime, but I'm simply telling you that we are not rushed for time. And we are already running a little bit late. But so I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce our first speaker. And it's Dr. Herman Winnick. And I actually have a note I'm supposed to have for him to remind you that he is the winner of the Andrei Sakharov Award. And he also shared a prize with Zafra from the New York Academy of Science, also on human rights. So he and Zafra have deep roots, and I met him first at the first Malta conference, where he brought to us the story of the synchrotron, and he's going to be talking about it, so I won't tell his story. So let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Herman Winnick from Stanford University Department of Physics.
Applied physics, actually.
And
SLAC.
Physics is physics.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Anne. As Anne said, Zafra and I go back some years and have done a lot of things promoting human rights together, is how I first interacted with her. And then when she organized the first Malta meeting, she discovered Sesame and decided that had to be included in that meeting. And, you know, the principle of that meeting is it's only Middle East scientists and Nobel Prize winners, neither of which I qualify for. But she made an exception because Sesame was so relevant to the meeting. It's also a pleasure to recall going back to sharing the Pagels Prize at the New York Academy of Science. I can't resist telling that when my laboratory at SLAC has a daily newspaper, they put out a note and they kindly mentioned that I shared the Pagels Prize with Zafra, but the headline said, "Winnick receives Academy Award." It was from the New York Academy, so I got a lot of covet from that from my family. Okay, let's go. And also, it's a pleasure to be on the same program with Dick Zare, someone who I've admired at Stanford, who's I think done more for education, particularly undergraduate education at Stanford, than almost anyone I can think of, besides being an outstanding scientist who actually worked with me at the synchrotron lab when I first came back in the 70s. And he's done incredible things for undergraduate education and for encouraging women, graduate students, mothers. I think he introduced the concept of the lactation room at Stanford, as a matter of fact. Interesting idea. Okay. Zafra has been recognized for her human rights activities in many ways. I don't know if I have all of them listed, but in 2005, she was noted for her tireless efforts on behalf of persecuted scientists around the world in the Human Rights Day of the AAAS. This is a recognition which recognizes significant contributions to advancing human rights within the scientific community, and mentions that she was chair of the... How do I get rid of that? Okay, there, okay. As you know, she chaired the American Chemical Society Subcommittee on Scientific Freedom and Human Rights. That's, in fact, how I think we first connected, because I chaired the comparable committee in the Physical Society, and we shared notes and worked together. Here's Zafra receiving the Hans Pagels Human Rights Award that I mentioned from the New York Academy, together with Joe Berman, who is chairman of the Human Rights Committee, and Torsten Wiesel, Nobel laureate, who was president of the New York Academy. In giving her the award, they noted that she's the American Chemical Society leading voice on behalf of human rights of scientists throughout the world. And as you know, she's traveled all over. The list of countries was mentioned a few times this morning, with particular reference to her work in 2003 to get 9 Palestinian scientists to attend the first Malta conference. Rather remarkable achievement. Here she is with Joe Berman with her certificate for the Pagels Award. And it goes on and on. There are many more, but another notable one is the Civilian Research and Development Foundation George Brown Award, a very prestigious award given to Zafra in 2008. That award, each year the CRDF, Civilian Research and Development Foundation, presents this award to recognize individuals for their critical work advancing international cooperation in science. And they point out her tenet to free and equal access to science education is a basic human right to all. They list the countries she's been to, bringing this message, and initiated collaborations between Israel and Cuba, and bringing science as a bridge to peace in the Middle East, which is really how she and I have connected over the years. I think Anne, the moderator of this session, summarized Zafra's contributions wonderfully. I don't know where this is from, but when Anne was president of the American Chemical Society, or even at another time, she wrote this. You may remember this, Anne, which I think succinctly, better than anyone could summarize the reason that we're here for Zafra, talking about in a time when the world's eyes are focused on the Middle East, etc. She brings this fresh approach. She's writing a new narrative that promises real progress with new voices, scientific voices, that have come together to form a new Middle East initiative. This is Malta, and it's also Sesame. So I think I'm indebted to Anne for summarizing it so well. Here is a photograph taken last November at the Malta meeting. I happened to be in Jordan. I was not invited for Malta 4, but I happened to be in Amman for a Sesame meeting at the time. And in addition to Zafra, who's standing right here, I think that's me in the back here, if you can see it. So Sesame is another project like Malta. I think these are the two major initiatives that have brought people from the Middle East together with scientists from other parts of the world. And that's, I'd like to tell you a bit about Sesame. It's a project that is building a synchrotron radiation facility as a collaboration of 9 countries in the Middle East listed here. And you have to look at this list. It contains, for example, Cyprus and Turkey, countries that don't recognize each other, sitting around the same table at council meetings twice a year. Israel and Iran sit next to each other because we seat them alphabetically at council meetings. They'd become friends. Many countries that have no diplomatic relations here, nevertheless, all are collaborating to build a central laboratory modeled on CERN under the auspices of UNESCO so that their students can get training in frontier science with a synchrotron radiation facility. Here it is. It's located in Jordan, but right next to the Jordan River. Here's a blow-up of that. Here's the Dead Sea. Here's the Jordan River. Very close to the major centers of West Bank universities that you may know, close to Jerusalem. Here it is in a town called Alan, about half an hour outside of the capital, Amman. There's the building. It's already completed, and work is going on inside. And as I stressed, it's under the auspices of UNESCO and modeled on CERN. It's really identical to CERN. The various ground rules and staff promotion, etc., are all lifted right out of the CERN documents. This is what we're building there. We're building a new 2.5 GeV, so-called third-generation electron synchrotron storage ring, which generates synchrotron radiation, which will feed many stations coming off tangentially. 2.5 GeV, a circumference of 133 meters, and space for 12 insertion devices, which is a hallmark of a third-generation machine. If you want more information, please go to this website, sesame.org.jo. JO is for Jordan. If you leave out JO, you'll get Sesame Street, which is not irrelevant because that's where young people are taught to cooperate and respect each other. So it's part of our objective. We had an inauguration of Sesame in November of 2008, and here is Zafra at that inauguration inside that building. You see some of the equipment being installed here, and here I'm showing them with a little magnet probe how the insertion device polarity goes up, down to make the electrons wiggle as they go between magnets, between bending magnets. This is the U.S. ambassador to UNESCO at the time, Louise Oliver, and Zafra. I think I'll check whether you really understood how insertion devices work, Zafra. We'll do that later. Yeah, okay. This is just an example of how projects like Sesame, how the Malta meetings bring people together. I met the mayor of Salt, the nearest large city to Sesame. His name is Salame. He said you can call it Salami if you want. And he became my friend. And this is a picture my wife took at that meeting. And here is Zafra, me, and Hadizadeh, Professor Hadizadeh. I'm showing his picture because he has also been a common interest to both Zafra and me. I met Hadi in 1999 at one of the first Sesame meetings that UNESCO sponsored, and we became friends and began working together on developing workshops to bring scientists from the Middle East together for these scientific workshops. And I learned a couple of years after we worked together that he was imprisoned. And I got to work to try to release him with letters from all kinds of people, including Zafra, I think, contributed to that. We got a letter written by 34 Nobel laureates asking for his release. How do I get rid of that? That's what I've been... It's obstinate. We'll see if it stays there for the next one. And I managed to get him a U.S. visa. He got an H-1B visa in 2003, came to this country. And I'm mentioning that in detail because critical to being able to bring him to this country was a program called Scholars at Risk that I'd like to make people aware of. And they, in fact, also shared the prize, the recognition, at Human Rights Day event by the AAAS. The Scholars at Risk Network and the Scholars Rescue Fund together provide funding to any institution anywhere in the world that will take such a person who's in danger in their own country for speaking out, for criticizing the government, or for any other activity such as Hadizadeh was, and they will offer up to $25,000 of matching funds to any institution that takes on such a person and gives them the ability to start a new life, continue their professional career. So I like to mention that, and you can look them up on the web. And if your university or institution is not part of this network, you might consider becoming that. This is just from their website. You can they provide this assistance to threatened scholars. The Scholars Rescue Fund provides the money. This just illustrates how Zafra has in bringing together people from the Middle East and through these Malta meetings. I'm not sure, this is Malta 2 or Malta 3, I'm not sure which, but I like this picture because the women in the Middle East, just as in this country, you've heard about women being underutilized in this country, they're certainly underutilized in the Middle East at the graduate and professional level, and Zafra is the model for them. Here she really brought together a bunch of people from this woman I know from Iran. I've met at a Sesame meeting, for example, and some of the others. So I think Zafra is doing such outstanding work by being there herself as a woman scientist of some recognition, as the role model for these people. There's another person who is doing a similar job. I don't know if you recognize the person in the middle. That's Ada Yonath, who got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. And here she was at a Sesame users meeting just a few months ago in November of '09. And again, just brought together these women, Middle East women, Arabic women, who now see that it's possible to develop a career in science. I'd like to mention also I worked with Zafra on many things having to do with human rights and academic freedom, particularly in connection with the Middle East. You may remember that in 2007, the ACS came to the conclusion that it had to expel its Iranian members. This led to quite a brouhaha. Zafra and I, in fact, I think I learned about it before Zafra and alerted her to it, and she got into action right away, as I did through the American Physical Society. And this was how it was written up in Science magazine, 30 March, and that led to a huge number of protests which actually succeeded. And I think it's a good example that people responding can make a difference. I was particularly impressed with one of the responses that I became aware of from Paul Walter, you may know him, who pointed out that even the old German Chemical Society waited for a formal demand that expel the Jews. The remarkable thing about this action by ACS in '07 is that nobody asked them to do that. Someone in ACS just took it upon themselves to kick these guys out. I was very pleased that in 2007 I chaired the Committee on International Freedom for Scientists of the Physical Society, and together with the management and the Chief Executive Officer of the Physical Society, we discussed this, because if ACS did this, it set a precedent with Physical Society. We decided not to do it, just to ignore it. And nobody bugged us, nobody said anything, and it just went away. And the Chemical Society reinstated them due to this huge influx of protests. Another interesting result of this, and the kind of interaction that Zafra and I have had getting to know personally scientists from the Middle East, is that just a few months after this event, in which we went to bat for our Iranian colleagues, they appreciated it so much. You may remember that in 2007, and I think still going on today, there was an Israeli boycott resolution passed by the Union of University and College Union, UCU, in the UK. And I alerted my Iranian friends who had just helped be reinstated to the American Chemical Society, and I was so pleased. We got half a dozen letters or so written by people from Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Iran, to Sally Hunt, the General Secretary of the University and College Union. And this is a remarkable one. I'd like you to read this. It's written by a very prominent Iranian string theorist, actually, at Tehran, Sharif University, their premier, the MIT of Iran. And he says, "Let me express my sincere opposition to the boycott of Israeli academics being considered by the University and College Union. As a scientist living in the Middle East, I appreciate the move of UCU to express its unhappiness about the restrictions being made by Israeli forces to the Palestinian students and academics. However, the decision made by the UCU is violating the same principles one is trying to defend. It is hard to accept that the Israeli academia are proponents of such restrictions." I think it's only because of interactions that people like Zafra have had with Middle East scientists that you learn about these things, you go to bat for them, and they also help you in cases like this. So, in summary, I think we have to thank Ada for making the world a better place. I think more than almost anyone I know, the efforts that she's had have been truly remarkable. We're grateful to you, Ada. Excuse me. I get these two confused. They're two so similar dynamic women. Okay. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. But anyway, Zafra, thank you for everything you've done. Look forward to many more years working together with you on these problems. Thank you so much. I said,